I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
For years, Charles Spencer guarded pieces of his sister's private world that the public was never meant to see. But one envelope carried a different weight. It was sealed, preserved, and addressed not to a king, a prince, or even one of Diana's sons, but to Catherine. When Spencer finally revealed that Princess Diana had left private words intended for the woman who would one day stand beside William, the implications reached far beyond a forgotten letter. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles Spencer did not speak carelessly. In a private documented account preserved with Diana's papers, he explained that some writings had never entered palace archives. Palace archives are the official collections used to preserve royal records for history, but this envelope belonged to a different world. It was personal, protected, and tied to a promise he had carried for years. Catherine felt the weight before she knew the words. Spencer placed the envelope into her hands and told her that Diana had written it for the woman William would one day trust with his private life. The Princess of Wales did not open it immediately. She held the seal between her fingers, aware that she had never met Diana, yet had spent years living beneath comparisons to her. William watched without interrupting. The prince understood that this was not another story about his mother being retold by strangers. This was her handwriting, her choice, her voice reaching into a marriage she never lived to see. He noticed Catherine pause over one short instruction written beside her name, and the silence in the room deepened. Spencer struggled most when he explained why he had waited. He said Diana had written about William's future with unusual seriousness, and had insisted the message should reach the right person at the right time. His voice tightened when he spoke her name. For him, handing over the letter was not a public gesture. It was the final act of keeping faith with his sister. Then Catherine began to read. One sentence stopped her almost instantly. William might one day need someone strong enough to protect the person beneath the crown. She looked up. He saw the change in her expression, but neither spoke. Spencer moved his chair closer and quietly told her she wanted this to reach the right person. Catherine broke the seal fully, and once Diana's first words were read aloud, the question was no longer why Charles Spencer had protected the letter. It was why Diana had imagined Catherine's role, years before Catherine ever entered William's life. Catherine had lived for years beneath a comparison she never asked for. Every gesture, every outfit, every expression beside William could somehow summon Diana's memory. Yet comparison was one thing. Receiving words personally intended for her was something else entirely. Suddenly Diana was no longer an image hanging over Catherine's royal life. Through one private letter, she had become a mother speaking across time about the son both women loved in profoundly different ways. William felt the meaning before he finished the next paragraph. Diana had understood the pressure waiting for him long before he became the man Catherine knew. The Prince of Wales, the title given to the monarch's direct heir, carried public duty everywhere he went. But his mother's words were focused on something far more private. She feared that responsibility could teach her son to hide pain so effectively that even the people closest to him might stop noticing it. Catherine recognized that pattern immediately. She had watched William become quieter under pressure, choosing restraint when others might have spoken, carrying difficult decisions without explaining how deeply they affected him. Diana's warning struck because it did not describe a distant possibility. It described moments Catherine had already lived through. Her task, the letter suggested, was not simply to stand beside a future king. It was to remember the husband, father, and son beneath the role. William reached for the pages after Catherine finished reading one passage, but she kept them in her hands for several seconds. Their eyes met. No one rushed the moment. Then she passed the letter across, and he read the same sentence once, paused, and read it again. The words spoke of a man who might one day become so practiced at duty that silence could begin to look like strength. Spencer knew there was more coming. In the private documented account he had preserved alongside Diana's papers, he explained that the letter was never intended as a simple blessing. His sister had written about royal marriage with painful clarity. She feared ceremony could replace closeness. Loyalty to the institution could overwhelm loyalty between two people, and a wife might eventually be encouraged to protect appearances before protecting her husband. Catherine felt the warning settle heavily. Diana was not asking her to fight the monarchy. She was asking her never to confuse service with emotional distance. If William ever became surrounded by expectations and unable to speak freely, the person beside him had to remain someone he could trust without performance. Spencer finally told them why Diana had written so specifically. One particular night had changed everything for her. And to understand that night, they would have to return to a royal conversation Diana never forgot. Every warning has a beginning, and Diana's began with a conversation almost no one remembered. It happened after a formal royal gathering, when the public smiles were finished, and the family had retreated behind closed doors. William was still young. The future seemed distant, yet something Diana heard that evening changed the way she thought about her eldest son's destiny. Before the night was over, she had begun imagining the woman who might one day have to protect him from the crown itself. Diana had already begun noticing how differently people spoke about William when they saw him as an heir rather than a child. The future sovereign, meaning the person expected one day to become monarch, was being prepared for duty long before he could understand its emotional cost. She feared that every lesson in discipline, composure, and responsibility might slowly teach him that vulnerability was something to hide. Spencer later recalled the turning point in a private documented account preserved with his sister's papers. After a formal family dinner at Windsor, Diana overheard senior royal figures discussing William's eventual marriage almost entirely in terms of suitability, stability, and institutional advantage. Windsor represented more than a residence. It was one of the monarchy's central royal homes, closely tied to family tradition and official life. To Diana, the language sounded cold. Her son's future sounded like a strategy. William changed everything later that same evening. Away from the formal conversation, he spoke quietly to his mother and said he hoped whoever he eventually married would know me before they know the crown. Diana did not dismiss the remark as something youthful. She heard fear beneath it. The boy she loved already understood that his title might someday enter a room before his personality did. Diana carried that sentence with her. She realized William's future wife could become one more person asking him to perform, or she could become the one person who reminded him he was allowed to stop performing. The difference terrified her because she knew how quickly private trust could disappear when public expectation entered a marriage. Spencer questioned her when she later spoke about leaving something behind. Diana admitted she could not choose the woman William would love, but she could leave that woman a warning. Her brother asked how anyone could deliver a letter to someone who did not yet exist in their lives. Diana answered by writing several pages anyway. She placed the folded papers before Spencer and gave him one instruction: preserve them. No name appeared on the intended recipient line. Instead, Diana described the letter as being for whoever William chose to build his real home with. Spencer looked at his sister and asked who that truly meant. Diana answered, for whoever makes him feel safe enough to be himself. Years later, Catherine would understand exactly why those words had been written. But the next paragraph carried something darker, because Diana's own marriage had taught her what happened when private trust finally broke. The letter changed when Catherine reached its middle pages. The warmth disappeared. Diana's language became sharper, almost painfully direct. She wrote about marriage inside royalty not as a fairy tale but as a test of loyalty under pressure. Then came the warning: never allow the institution to convince William that his feelings are an inconvenience. Catherine stopped reading. Spencer knew the passage was coming. William knew instantly that something inside the room had shifted. Catherine understood why those words carried such force. Diana had learned how loneliness could grow quietly inside a marriage, not through one dramatic rupture, but through small moments when duty began replacing honesty. Royal duty, meaning the public responsibilities attached to senior members of the monarchy, could demand discipline and silence, even when private emotion needed the opposite. Catherine had watched William carry that tension for years. William heard the warning differently. The prince had built much of his adult life around control, responsibility, and protecting others from his own frustration. Catherine knew the signs when pressure became heavier. Fewer words, longer pauses, decisions made without complaint. Diana's letter seemed to recognize that habit decades before it fully formed, and that recognition unsettled him more than either Catherine or Spencer expected. Catherine lowered the pages and looked directly at Spencer. Did she really mean for someone she had never met to carry all of this? She asked. He answered carefully. Diana had not expected William's future wife to rescue him. She wanted that woman to refuse to stop seeing him when everyone else saw only rank, expectation, and succession. William reacted sharply. He asked Spencer why the letter had remained hidden for so long, if his mother had considered it this important. Spencer did not retreat. In the private documented account attached to Diana's instructions, she had made timing part of the trust. Releasing the pages too early, he explained, could have turned a deeply personal message into public mythology before William had even built the marriage she was writing about. Catherine read further. Diana's most direct instruction was simple. If William ever began speaking only as the heir and stopped speaking as himself, the woman beside him should remind him what kind of life they had promised each other. Then came another line about children. Diana hoped they would know their father as a man before they understood him as a future king. The room tightened around that thought. Catherine lowered the letter and asked Spencer, "Why now?" He looked first at William, then back at her. "Because she wanted me to wait until I knew the marriage had become what she hoped it could be." That answer changed everything. Spencer was admitting that he had watched Catherine and William for years before deciding Diana's words had finally reached their rightful destination. For once, the palace had no announcement to draft, no protocol to impose, and no official statement capable of controlling the moment. Diana's letter belonged to a different realm, family memory. Charles Spencer had protected it outside the machinery that governed royal correspondence, and that gave him something unusual in a story surrounding the future king control. His decision was personal, irreversible, and based on a standard Catherine never knew she had spent years being measured against. Spencer had always believed that some parts of his sister's legacy belonged first to those she trusted, not to the institution around them. Royal correspondence, meaning official letters and records connected to the monarchy's public duties, could eventually become part of formal archives. Diana's message was different. She had handed responsibility for it to her brother personally, and he believed that promise mattered more than palace convenience. Catherine listened without interrupting. Her place in William's life had changed beyond recognition since their earliest years together. She was now his wife, the mother of their children, and a senior royal figure whose choices helped shape the monarchy's future. Yet Spencer admitted that those very responsibilities had made him hesitate. He feared Diana's words might become another impossible standard placed on Catherine's shoulders. William felt that hesitation differently. Part of him was grateful Spencer had protected something so private. Another part struggled with the fact that words from his mother had existed for years beyond his reach. He leaned forward and asked why his uncle had believed he alone could decide when the message should finally be delivered. Spencer removed his glasses before answering. In a private documented account attached to Diana's instructions, she had left one condition. The letter should reach William's chosen partner only when that person had shown that family stability mattered more than ceremonial ambition. Spencer told Catherine he had watched difficult moments come and go. He had seen her protect privacy, defend time with their children, and remain beside William when public pressure made retreat easier than confrontation. Catherine realized what he was saying. The letter had not arrived because she had become important enough. It had arrived because Spencer believed she had become trustworthy enough. That distinction cut deeper than praise because it meant Diana's message had carried a test inside it all along. William asked the question that had been building from the beginning. What stopped you before? Spencer held his gaze. I needed to know the crown would never come before your home. The answer silenced them both. Now William had to decide whether the letter remained private or became something their children might one day inherit. And once that choice entered the room, Diana's warning stopped being history. It became a question about the life William was already living. William did not explode. He did not challenge Spencer again. He simply became quiet. And for Catherine, that silence was more revealing than anger could have been. Diana's letter had reached directly into the conflict William had carried for most of his life, the need to honor the crown without disappearing inside it. Now his mother's voice, preserved across decades, was telling Catherine to guard precisely the part of him duty demanded most often. William looked at the handwriting differently now. This was no longer Diana, the global figure remembered through speeches, photographs, and public grief. This was his mother thinking about the adult son she would never see. The crown, meaning the responsibilities and institutions surrounding the sovereign and future monarch, demanded continuity and restraint. Her letter worried about something smaller and more human, whether those demands might someday leave him emotionally alone. Catherine understood why that mattered. Nothing in the document changed succession, titles, or constitutional duty. Yet privately, it validated choices she and William had already fought to protect time with their children, boundaries around family life, and the belief that public service should never consume everything behind closed doors. Diana's words did not rewrite the monarchy. They gave emotional meaning to decisions the couple had already made. William traced one sentence with his finger and stopped. He wanted to ask his mother what she had meant, why she had feared this future so deeply, and whether she would believe he had become the man she hoped for. But there would be no answers. He set the pages down before finishing the paragraph and moved away from the table. Catherine followed without speaking. When William finally admitted that hearing Diana anticipate his adult struggles felt almost unbearable, she answered softly that perhaps his mother had not been trying to predict his pain. Perhaps she had been trying to make certain he would never have to carry it alone. He looked back at Catherine, and for the first time since the letter had been opened, his anger gave way to grief. Spencer remained near the table. Then he noticed something they had missed. One final sealed page tucked inside the packet. In the private documented account attached to Diana's instructions, she had specified that this shorter message should be read only after the longer letter was understood. Catherine opened it carefully. The tone changed completely. Diana was no longer warning, she was releasing. She asked William's future partner not to become another version of her, not to inherit her battles, and not to live beneath her shadow. She wanted that woman to build something healthier than the life she herself had been able to sustain. William stood near the doorway, struggling to contain the emotion. Catherine carried the final page toward him, and what happened next required no courtiers, no advisors, and no protocol. Only William, Catherine, and a promise Diana would never hear. Away from Spencer, away from the letter's history, and away from every expectation attached to their names, William and Catherine finally spoke alone. There was no audience and no institution between them. For William, the question was painfully simple. Had his mother been right to fear that the crown could one day swallow the man beneath it? Catherine's answer would determine whether Diana's letter remained a warning from the past or became a promise shaping their future. Catherine did not treat the message as an instruction to control him. She understood it as permission to challenge the emotional distance that royal duty could create. That duty, meaning the public responsibilities expected from senior members of the monarchy, had shaped almost every part of William's adult life. She knew those responsibilities mattered, but she also knew they could become dangerous if they demanded silence every time something hurt. William admitted that he had spent years measuring decisions against two competing loyalties. One belonged to the role he had inherited. The other belonged to the people waiting for him when the official obligations ended. Sometimes those loyalties worked together. Sometimes they did not. He confessed that the hardest moments were the ones when doing what was expected publicly felt different from doing what was needed privately. Catherine took his hand. She told him she could not remove the weight of his future, and would never pretend she could. She could not erase responsibility, history, or the expectations attached to the crown. But she could promise one thing. She would never treat those burdens as more important than the person carrying them. William finally admitted which sentence had affected him most. Diana's hope that his children would know him first, as their father had cut through everything else. His thoughts went immediately to George, Charlotte, and Louis. He had spent years protecting ordinary moments with them, because he understood how quickly royal childhood could become preparation for something larger. Catherine returned to the final folded page. Diana's concluding sentiment changed the meaning of the entire letter. The right woman, she had written, should never try to preserve her place beside William. She should create a place entirely her own. Catherine felt something loosen inside her. For years, comparisons with Diana had followed her into public life. Now Diana's own words rejected that comparison. She was not being asked to become another version of William's mother. She was being asked to build something different. William squeezed her hand. Catherine told him she would never ask him to choose between being responsible and being human. He answered quietly that his mother would have understood exactly why those words mattered. When they returned to Spencer, they had made their decision about the letter. And now the private message was about to face something Diana could never control: the judgment of the outside world. The moment news of Diana's private message reached beyond the family, the reaction became impossible to contain. This was not another piece of jewelry, another photograph. or another recycled memory. It was Diana speaking directly into the future of the monarchy and appearing to place extraordinary emotional faith in Catherine. Within hours, one question dominated the conversation. Had the most famous Princess of Wales somehow anticipated the qualities the next Princess of Wales would eventually need? William understood why the story struck so deeply. His mother had become part of national memory long before he reached adulthood, while Catherine now stood beside him raising the next generation. The Princess of Wales, the traditional title held by the wife of the heir to the throne, carried echoes of Diana whether she wanted them or not. That connection made the letter feel larger than a family document almost immediately. Spencer watched the reaction with mixed emotions. In a recorded private conversation preserved after the handover, he admitted that he was relieved people understood Diana's concern for William, but uneasy about watching handwritten words become a public symbol. He had protected the message for years, because it was intimate. Now headlines were turning it into something far bigger than the sister he remembered. Catherine refused to treat the moment as a triumph. She knew Diana's warning had never been about winning affection, defeating rivals, or claiming a place in history. It had been about protecting intimacy when public life threatened to consume it. Turning the letter into a victory would betray the very message she had just received. Outside Kensington Palace, the reaction became impossible to ignore. Crowds gathered near the gates where public grief for Diana had once transformed the royal residence into a national place of mourning. One newspaper appeared with two portraits dominating its front page: Diana beside Catherine, and the headline, "Her words found their home." Within hours, that single image became the symbol everyone remembered. William saw commentators seize on one phrase above all others: the person beneath the crown. For many, it captured the conflict that had defined his life: public destiny on one side, private identity on the other. He understood why the words resonated. He also knew they belonged to something far more personal than the debate now surrounding them. Catherine saw the front page lying on a table and turned it face down. Then she picked up Diana's handwritten pages. She asked William whether the original could remain with their family papers instead of becoming a public exhibit. He answered without hesitation. And with the noise outside growing louder, Catherine made one final choice that returned Diana's message to where it had always belonged, not inside the machinery of monarchy, but inside a family. In the end, the most powerful thing Diana left Catherine was not the paper in her hands. It was permission. Permission to love William without competing with his mother's memory. Permission to build a royal marriage different from the one Diana herself endured. And permission to remember that behind every crown stands a human being capable of loneliness, fear, tenderness, and doubt. What began as Charles Spencer's shocking revelation ended as something far quieter. One woman entrusting another with her son. Catherine knew what had to happen next. She and William agreed that Diana's original letter would remain with their family, rather than become a permanent public object. The decision mattered, because historical papers connected to royalty can easily become institutional possessions, preserved for official study or display. This message had never been written for an institution. It had been written for a relationship Diana could only imagine. Spencer accepted the decision without resistance. In the private documented account surrounding the handover, he explained that preserving the letter had never been about creating one final sensation around his sister. He had protected it because Diana wanted the message to reach the person who would eventually share William's real life. Now that person was standing before him, and his responsibility was finally complete. Catherine told Spencer she would not spend the rest of her life trying to live up to Diana. The letter itself had released her from that burden. She could honor William's mother without becoming an imitation of her. Her responsibility was simpler and harder: protect the trust inside her own marriage and remain herself while doing it. William turned to his uncle with gratitude mixed with pain. He admitted that part of him still wished the letter had come sooner, yet he also understood what Spencer's silence had preserved. Diana's words had reached him without decades of public interpretation, reshaping them first. For once, his mother had spoken to him without the world standing between them. Catherine folded the pages along their original creases and returned them to the envelope. She and William agreed that George, Charlotte, and Louis would eventually learn why their grandmother had written those words. The letter would become family inheritance, not royal mythology. Spencer watched Catherine hand the envelope to William. He held it against his palm for several seconds before saying quietly, "She knew what mattered." And that was the final truth. Diana had not been trying to control her son's future. She had simply hoped that when duty became overwhelming, someone would remember the human being beneath it. Catherine did not replace her. William did not escape his destiny. Spencer did not rewrite the past. Instead, 3 lives separated by time were finally connected by one promise. The letter had reached its destination. Diana's imagined future was no longer waiting to arrive. It was already there. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.